This is a prose writing task, not a document creation task. I'll write it directly in the chat. Welcome to a story about the night everything fell apart. And the single, silent act that put it all back together. The dinner had been my mother's idea, as most family gatherings were. She had a talent for orchestrating occasions that felt, from the outside, like celebrations of togetherness, and from the inside, like carefully staged productions where everyone knew their role except me. Our family was large in the way that certain families are, not just in number, but in presence. Aunts who spoke in declarations. Uncles who laughed too loudly at their own jokes. Cousins who competed for invisibility or dominance, with very little ground in between. And then there were my parents, seated at opposite ends of a table that had held 20 years of Sunday meals, holiday feasts, and the particular kind of silence that settles between people who have run out of things to pretend about. I was 31 years old that evening. I had driven 2 hours to be there. I had ironed my shirt. The tension had been building for months, though if I am being precise about it, the tension had been building for much longer than that. Perhaps for as long as I could remember. In the way that certain family dynamics embed themselves so deeply into the architecture of daily life that you stop recognizing them as unusual, and simply accept them as the weather you were born into. My parents had strong opinions about how a life should be lived. My father believed in security above all else, in the kind of career that announced itself clearly at dinner parties, in a trajectory that moved in one direction, upward, visible, and approved of. My mother believed in family, in proximity, in the unspoken agreement that love was expressed through obedience, and that independence was a kind of betrayal dressed up in the language of ambition. I had spent most of my adult life trying to honor both of them while quietly becoming someone they had not planned for. What I had done, what had prompted the dinner, though I would not understand that until I was already seated and the bread had been passed, was leave my corporate job 8 months earlier to build a small business of my own. I had not announced it dramatically. I had not sought permission, which in retrospect was perhaps the first mistake in a long series of miscalculations about what my parents considered theirs to approve or reject. I had simply made a decision about my own life, the way adults are supposed to, and I had spent the better part of a year building something real and careful and mine. I had also spent that year preparing for this moment, though I had not known that was what I was doing. I had kept records. I had saved documents. I had organized, with the quiet precision of someone who understood at a cellular level that the truth would eventually need to be demonstrated rather than simply stated, a folder of everything that mattered. I brought it with me to dinner inside a plain manila envelope. I set it on the passenger seat of my car, and did not touch it again until I needed to. The meal began pleasantly enough, which is to say that it began with the particular pleasantness of a room full of people who are performing pleasantness while waiting for something else to happen. There were questions about the drive. There were compliments about the food. My cousin showed photographs of a recent vacation. And for a while the table moved with the easy rhythm of people who are relieved to be talking about things that do not matter. I ate my food and watched and waited, because I had learned long ago that the shape of these evenings was never determined by me. It was my uncle who opened the door, though I suspect he had been handed the key beforehand. He asked, with the studied casualness of a man delivering a rehearsed question, how things were going with my little project. The table shifted almost imperceptibly, in the way that rooms shift when something real is about to enter them. I answered honestly. I said things were going well. I said I had clients, that revenue was growing, that I had built something I was genuinely proud of. I said this without apology, which I think was what broke the dam. My father set down his fork. That small sound, the quiet click of silverware against ceramic, landed in the room like a gavel. He said, without looking at me directly at first, that he was embarrassed. He said that word with the full weight he had always given it, embarrassment being, in his estimation, one of the more serious moral categories available to a person. He said he did not know what to tell people when they asked about me. He said that a man my age should have made something of himself by now. Something with a title and a pension, and a name that meant something to someone respectable. He said I had wasted my education. He said I had wasted their sacrifice. By the time he looked up and met my eyes, he had built sufficient momentum that the next part came out almost naturally, as though it had been sitting in him for a long time, and the evening had finally offered the right architecture to hold it. He said that as far as he was concerned, I was not making choices that reflected the values of this family. My mother, who had been quiet until that moment with the focused quiet of someone conserving energy, said that she agreed. She said she did not know who I was anymore. She said I had always been difficult, and that she had hoped I would grow out of it, but that apparently she had been wrong. She said, with the extended table as her witness, that they could not support what I was doing, could not endorse it, and could not continue to present me to the world as though everything was fine when it was not. She said other things. My father said other things. Cousins looked at their plates. An aunt refilled her water glass with the intense concentration of someone who needed her hands to be occupied. The room held very still around all of it, the way rooms do when something is being said that cannot be unsaid, when the performance of a family dinner becomes briefly, undeniably real. I did not raise my voice. I have thought about this moment many times since, and I think the reason I did not raise my voice was not composure in any noble sense, but something simpler. I had already decided some months before that if this conversation ever happened in the way I feared it might, I was not going to fight it with words alone. Words, in my family, had always been the least reliable currency. There was too much history between us, too many competing narratives, too many years of conversations that dissolved into feelings rather than facts. I was not going to win an argument at that table. I had known that long before I sat down at it. So I waited until there was a pause in what was being said, and then I reached down to the bag I had placed beside my chair, and I took out the plain manila folder, and I set it on the table. I did not open it immediately. I let it sit there for a moment, ordinary and patient, and I watched the room look at it. And then I said quietly that I wanted to share some things with them. I said I understood their concerns. I said I knew that what I had chosen looked, from the outside, like instability. I said I knew it was different from what they had imagined for me, and that I was sorry the distance between their vision and my life had caused them pain. I said I meant that sincerely, because I did. Then I opened the folder. Inside was the documentation of the past 8 months rendered into something undeniable. There were bank statements showing revenue growth that followed a clear and upward trajectory. There were signed contracts with clients, names and terms and figures that established concretely that what I was building was real and that people were paying for it. There were letters from those clients, some of which I had not solicited but had received anyway, expressing gratitude and indicating ongoing engagement. There were projections, conservative ones prepared by an accountant I had hired specifically because I trusted neither my own optimism nor my parents' dismissiveness. And those projections were sound. There was a one-page summary at the front of all of it that a colleague had helped me draft, the kind of summary that would have been at home in any investor presentation, clear and precise and stripped of sentimentality. I passed the pages around the table, not aggressively, not with the satisfaction of someone winning a point, but carefully, the way you offer something important to people you love and are also afraid of. I narrated quietly as the pages moved. I explained the numbers. I answered questions when they came, and they did come, cautiously at first, and then with the genuine curiosity of people who were looking at information they had not expected to find convincing. The evening changed in the way that rooms change when the facts in them change. It did not change all at once. My father did not immediately apologize, because he was not a man who found apologies easily available to him, and I had long ago made my peace with that. My mother did not soften visibly in the way that scenes in films have trained us to expect, some sudden light entering her eyes. What happened was quieter, and in some ways more significant than any of that. The conversation shifted from verdict to question. People began asking things they actually wanted to know. How I had found my first client, what the work actually involved, what I was building toward. My uncle, the one who had opened the evening's proceedings with his rehearsed question, looked at the bank statements for a long time and then said, with what I believe was genuine and slightly uncomfortable respect, that he had not realized it was like that. My father, somewhere toward the end of that evening, said that he still did not entirely understand it. He said that it was not the path he would have chosen. He said this like a concession rather than an attack, which was different, and I accepted it as such. My mother said that she supposed she would need to learn more about what I was doing. She said this with the effortful neutrality of someone dismantling a position they had held for a long time, which is its own kind of courage, even when it comes late. I drove home that night with the folder on the passenger seat beside me again, lighter now, having passed through the room and back to me, and I thought about what it meant to prepare for the worst as a form of self-respect. I had not built that folder because I wanted to defeat my parents. I had built it because I understood, somewhere below the level of conscious strategy, that love and evidence are not opposites, and that sometimes the most honest thing you can offer the people who formed you is proof that you know what you are doing, rendered in a language they can actually read. I had wanted them to see me not as the difficult child they had invented over decades of worry, but as the person I had actually become. Careful, deliberate, competent, and mine. Families are complicated economies. They trade in old currencies, roles assigned in childhood, fears never spoken aloud, love expressed as control because control is the only language some people learned for holding on to what matters to them. My parents were not villains in that dining room. They were people who were frightened, and who had expressed their fear in the way that people do when they have not learned a better way to express it. Loudly, publicly, with the blunt instrument of withdrawal. I do not tell this story to condemn them. I tell it because I think there is something in it worth understanding about the relationship between evidence and dignity, about what it means to walk into a room that is designed to diminish you and choose, instead of argument, the quiet authority of demonstrated truth. The folder did not fix everything. Nothing fixes everything. But it changed the terms of the conversation. And changing the terms of a conversation is sometimes the only meaningful thing one person can do for another. My father called me 2 weeks later to ask a follow-up question about one of the contracts. My mother forwarded me an article about small business development, without comment, which from her was essentially a love letter. We have not returned to that dinner in direct conversation, because families often process the hardest truths sideways, in small gestures and changed behaviors rather than acknowledged reckoning. But something shifted. The weight of their disapproval, which I had carried for 8 months without fully admitting I was carrying it, became something different. Not gone, but lighter, negotiable, no longer absolute. I think about the moment I set that folder on the table more than I think about anything else that happened that evening. Not the words that were said before it. Not the faces of cousins who did not know where to look, not even the long drive home through darkness. I think about that moment because it taught me something about the kind of person I want to be in conflict. Not louder, not harder, not more defended, but more prepared. Preparation is a form of self-belief made visible. When you have done the work, and you know you have done the work, and you have the evidence of the work organized and ready and calm in a folder on the seat beside you. There is a particular kind of peace available in that. Not the peace of someone who does not care about the outcome. The peace of someone who has decided that the truth they carry is worth defending, and who has shown up, iron shirt and all, ready to defend it. I still have that folder. I keep it in the second drawer of my desk, beneath a few other things, where I can find it if I need it. I have not needed it since. But it is there, patient and exact, A record of what happened when I stopped asking for permission to be who I already was, and simply showed the evidence instead.